You work during the week, don't you?
Yeah.
What do you do?
Carpenter.
And during the weekend, when do you usually turn on first?
Friday night, Friday evening.
Yvonne and Alan are meth heads, drug addicts. The drug they use is Methedrin, a powerful stimulant they inject into their veins. Methedrin is the drug young addicts have turned to since the government restricted supplies of heroin and cocaine last spring. 4 days ago, the government finally acted to curb its abuse by young people like these. Only hospitals will now be allowed to handle Methedrin, and it won't be available to meth heads.
If tomorrow someone sort of said there'll be no more meth from tomorrow, what would be the first thing you'd do?
Oh, gosh. I'd run about as fast as I can see if I can find some.
Yeah, and if you couldn't find any?
Like that.
Well, I'd go to the hospital. That's what they can do for me.
And if they wouldn't give you any meth at the hospital?
Most likely jump out the window.
Would you try using anything else?
Yes, if I had to.
If a situation arose in which there wasn't any Methedrin at all to be had, would it worry you?
Yeah. Because I came on to Methedrin from pills, and pills are no use to me now. And, you know...
Are you hung up on the needle?
Yeah.
You don't think if there were no meth, you'd just stop using altogether?
Oh, no, I couldn't.
Methedrin first appeared on the Piccadilly drug scene 18 months ago. In that time, its addicts multiplied, while the politicians, drug makers and doctors wondered what to do. Last week in a Soho club, we gathered together a number of Methedrin addicts, the addicts that nobody planned for.
How many people do you reckon round in Stoke Newington there are who you know personally are using meth?
Well, I know personally about 40, but there's a whole lot more, you know.
How many people would you say yourself there are in London who are using meth?
Well, it's impossible to calculate, but...
Well, have a guess.
Give the Minister of Health houses, I tell you, if he knew.
Do you reckon there are more? Do you reckon there are more than a couple of hundred?
Oh, gee.
More than a couple of thousand.
About 10,000, you know, just weekend users, perhaps.
There can't be as many as that. Surely, I mean, not as many as...
money on
I
it.
bet you you'll have that. All the Methedrin damage is being done by private doctors, and that's where all the Methedrin's coming. There are very few people registered for it.
The Methedrin used by these addicts is a powerful stimulant with no place in general practice. The flood of Methedrin onto the London market has been the work of a handful of private doctors. Last week, World in Action sent a reporter to call on Dr. Lionel James Wood, said to be a ready source of Methedrin prescriptions. Our reporter claimed to be an addict and asked for Methedrin. First, he was told to place £5 on the table. Then he was questioned but not examined by Dr. Wood in his surgery at 68 Townsend Court, North London. Dr. Wood wrote out a prescription for 35 ampules of Methedrin and told our reporter to send along his addict friends. Next day, we took up the offer and sent along another World in Action reporter with another £5. Again, no physical examination was made, and this time Dr. Wood upped the dose to 40 ampules. It's not, of course, illegal for Dr. Wood to prescribe Methedrin in this way, simply irresponsible and dangerous. Had we taken our Methedrin from the chemist to the black market, we could also have made ourselves a lot of money.
Thank you. It'll be 10 minutes, okay?
Okay.
Last night, for instance, our £10 worth of Methedrin ampules would finally have sold for £100 among the addicts of Piccadilly. We asked a chemist, Vincent Hall, about the sudden rise in demand for Methedrin.
Prior to the clinics being opened, a few months ago, we were dispensing about 60,000 heroin tablets, 100 to 125 grams of cocaine powder, and about 4,000 ampules of Methedrin per month. Since then, there's been a very large decrease in these amounts. Heroin in the region of 18,000, a two-thirds drop probably. Cocaine, probably a 75% drop. But then on the other hand, Methedrin has ballooned up 4 to 5 times the amount that we were using previously, up to the region of 20,000 a month.
The Methedrin that you dispense, Is it mostly manufactured by one firm, or
Mostly, yes, yes. Mostly manufactured by Burroughs Wellcome.
what sort of volume of the total amount would you say is Burroughs Wellcome?
Oh, I should think 80% of it. 80%.
In central London, a handful of chemists' shops have been dispensing about 100,000 ampules a month on doctors' orders. Methedrin often makes addicts extremely aggressive and suspicious to the point of paranoia. Indeed, doctors fear that it may cause permanent brain damage. Some addicts share this fear.
The authorities as a whole seem to have gotten hold of the idea that methadone is somehow less damaging and less harmful than cocaine. And I think this is ridiculous. Sure, I know cocaine destroys the brain. So does methadone. The thing is, methadone does it much more quicker.
I was going to say, I think it's true to say that the methadone user, that is the person that fixes methadone in quantity, is possibly the worst off of all junkies, and is in the worst mental and physical state of mind.
This psychiatrist is also worried about the effects of methadone on the mind. Many London addicts find shelter in the crypt of St. Martin-in-the-Fields in Trafalgar Square. He meets them there to talk about their addiction. The first boy he spoke to while we were there was Mick. Mick is 17.
I'd see things, you know, and I'd start really get involved in looking for it, even though I knew it wasn't there, but I just couldn't stop, you know. And just drove me
Do you feel there were people after you?
Yeah, the police, you know. The
Tell me
ones.
about that.
Well, first of all, I start seeing them in cars and everything, and they walk up to you. You know, it's funny. They're not police, you know, and you start shouting at them, you know.
Tell me, have you ever found yourself picking your skin?
Yeah.
Tell me a bit about that.
Well, it's just bugs, you know, sort of thing. You start picking and you can't stop yourself picking, and you tear your skin about, and you get big lumps under your skin, and you pick them in one place and they move to the next. It's funny.
Bugs? Real bugs?
No, they're not. I don't know, you know, I don't know if they're real bugs or not.
You think you've got bugs in your skin?
No, it's just... Well, I might have, you know.
And you pick your face? What sort of state do you get your face into?
Well, a couple of weeks ago, it's healed up now, you know. It was all swollen and, you know, in scabs and that.
You do this for hours and hours?
Yeah, if someone doesn't come and sort of take my concentration away from it.
Do you think, Mick, that since you've taken methadone, it's done you good or harm?
Well, I know it's done me harm, but it's the buzz out of it that I can think of. Not
Do you like yourself better or worse since you've taken it?
Well, I can't remember what I was like when I was normal.
These two methadone addicts, Terry and Bridget, are married. They come from Welwyn Garden City, just outside London.
How long have you two been married?
7 months.
How old are you now?
20.
How old are you?
I'm 20 as well.
When did you start using drugs?
Continuously at the age of 15.
Still at school when you started?
When I started smoking cannabis, I was still at school.
How long have you been on methadone?
About 2.5 years.
You're both on methadone, right?
Yeah.
Terry, do you think it's done you good or harm?
Definitely harm.
Done anything to your mind? Has it made you...
I get a bit paranoid at times.
What do you mean by that?
I get the feeling people are all looking at me and talking about me as I walk around.
What effects it had on you?
I get paranoid, but I cut my hair off once.
Why did you do that?
Because I thought there were things in it, you know?
What do you think there was in it?
Just nothing specific, just sort of things, you know, small things moving. I could feel them moving, and I just cut it off.
Do you think it's dangerous taking methadone?
We feel it's more dangerous than taking heroin, really.
What way?
It tends to knock you out physically a lot more than heroin does. But that's me, you know.
Yes, you feel terribly exhausted.
Could you work on methadone?
Yes, but not as well as, you know.
Using it constantly you could, but then when you stop you couldn't because you'd be too exhausted.
Tell me, can you look after a house properly using methadone?
Yes, I do, you know, my house is tidy and clean. I do all my housework.
You ever known anyone die from using the needle?
Yes.
Yeah. A guy we knew, very intelligent bloke, he died recently in town. And a guy in Welwyn Garden City died recently as an after effect of taking drugs.
What do you both feel about that? Does it worry you?
Yeah, I think it's awful.
I don't think when you take drugs, you don't go around with the impression you're going to die all the while, you know. But occasionally the question does crop up and, well, we never really think about it.
18 months ago, Weldon Action informed Burroughs Wellcome, the manufacturers, that addicts were turning to Methedrin. Quick restrictions might have stopped the growth of addiction, but the growth went unchecked, and now even the addicts seem worried.
The danger is, as I said before, is the ones that are getting prescribed a lot of Methedrin and aren't using a lot. They might only be using a few amps, and they're getting prescribed perhaps 200 or 300 a week, which isn't ridiculous. It is happening, and they're the people to whom the weekend lunars score from, and but the only thing you can do about it, I think the whole thing should be banned anyway. You know, they should stop making it.
The manufacturers didn't stop. Indeed, Methedrin sales by the large central chemists in London quadrupled between March and September this year. Meanwhile, the politicians, drug makers and doctors still talked about the problem.
I mean, why did they make it so easy in the first place to get meth? I mean, why have they let it go so far, and now they're trying to stop it just like that? That's not right, is it?
The manufacturers argue that they alone could not have placed curbs on Methedrin. They had to consider the hospital anaesthetists and country doctors who wanted it handy during operations. We asked a consultant anaesthetist about the importance of Methedrin as a stimulant after surgery.
I would say from my own experience that it's decreasing.
Do you know amongst your own colleagues roughly how much Methedrin they would use during a year?
This, of course, is very difficult for me to say, but I know from my own experience and from that of my junior colleagues that it's hardly ever used at all.
How many operations have you been the anaesthetist for over the past year?
Once again, a very difficult question, but in excess of 1,000.
And how many ampoules of Methedrin have you personally used during that time?
None. None. I haven't used an ampoule for the last year.
A Weldon Action inquiry among 45 hospitals confirmed a steady decline in the popularity of Methedrin for hospital use. There are now perfectly acceptable alternatives. We calculate that each week, London addicts had been using 10 times more Methedrin than all British hospitals. Last Thursday, Methedrin was finally banned, and once again the search for an alternative begins.
Well, actually, what I am trying to say is that before I started on Methedrin, I was taking tablets. I took Methedrin, and I don't think they'll give me the same effect as tablets, so therefore, well, I think I might turn to cocaine, something like that, something greater. I could never carry on tablets again. They don't seem to do anything to me. And I think if they stop Methedrin, I think more people will turn to cocaine and H, knowing that there is nothing else besides them too.
Would you be bothered if you couldn't get any more meth at all?
Yes, I would actually.
Would you use anything else?
Well, I drink excessively now, and I smoke as well, so I think I'd just drink more and smoke. I don't think I'd go into heroin. I'm not sure. It's very unpredictable. I'm an unpredictable person, so I can't really say.
What would you personally use if you couldn't have any more Methedrin?
Well, I don't know, because there's nothing else that I've had yet that's had the same effects. You know, I mean, there's nothing the same as meth, so I mean, what would that get to? Well, I mean, tablets that don't have the same effect at all on me. I mean, having used Methedrin, you can't use anything else.
Methedrin, I think, is about 20 times stronger than one blue, and it works on you immediately. As for tablet form, it's not nearly strong, and it takes about an hour to work. You know, and you've got to take so many of them before you get any effect. And it does do you harmful to your stomach. It does when you get terrible upset stomach at time to time, you know. And
yeah, but I think with Methedrin, partly it's the thought of the needle with a lot of people. You know, I mean, it's just using something.
We asked two medical experts what addicts would try next. First, a psychiatrist from a London drug clinic.
Well, they're likely to turn to stimulant tablets of one sort or another, such as amphetamine tablets or methadone tablets, which they could take in large quantities by mouth, which many of them will have been doing beforehand anyway. And then, of course, there's always the possibility that they would take these tablets, crush them and dissolve them in water and inject themselves with them. I think one can't avoid this very real possibility. The fact is that people who take amphetamines take them because they want a stimulating effect, which they value very highly. This isn't a physically addictive thing, it's a psychologically addictive thing. They don't value the experience of taking tablets, really, by the time they've got to injecting themselves, because tablets don't act quickly enough for them. And also, of course, there's no doubt that people do become very dependent on the needle and the syringe itself, so that I think there's a very real danger of people just doing that, as I say, just crushing up tablets and injecting themselves.
Francis Camps, Professor of Forensic Medicine at the University of London and President of the Society for the Study of Addiction. His prognosis is equally gloomy.
Well, you go back to amphetamine, of course, and which is a rather milder form, and of course you don't give intravenously. I think the danger of this at the moment is that although there is methadone which can be used intravenously as a main line, you can also use the tablets crushed up, and tablets which are normally prepared to be swallowed don't necessarily contain the right constituents to be shoved into the circulation.
Stockholm, Sweden. The man clambering up the wall is a plainclothes policeman. He's searching for pills, smuggled amphetamine pills. This July, the Swedes took drastic action to control their drug problem and banned amphetamines. But the drug taking goes on. Over 3 million pills have been seized by the police in the last 12 months. There's a vigorous barter trade. A transistor radio is worth 15 packets of amphetamine pills, a forged passport about 25, and a TV set 40 packets. A flat in a suburb of Stockholm. This is a drug kvarter, a group of people who regularly inject crushed amphetamine tablets into the vein. In the last 2 years, this form of drug taking has reached what medical authorities in Sweden have called an epidemic. Now, more than £10,000 a day is being spent on the black market to buy pills smuggled into Sweden. Despite the severe penalties, the numbers of injecting addicts are the highest in any country outside of the United States. Dr. Sven Lidholm is a forensic scientist with the Karolinska Institute in Stockholm.
I'd say it's a serious problem. It's of course difficult to give you an exact figure, but something like 10,000. Among those, I guess that roughly 7,000 use the drugs temporarily, but 3,000 people are what I would call hard drug addicts.
Get down! These young Swedes inject large numbers of crushed pills into their veins. At the rate they're going, they've got 2 years to live. Injected particles can cause fits, abscesses, and sometimes death. For Sweden, these pills are a menace. Dr. Magnus Chilbohm of the Swedish National Health Board.
They have no place as a medicine. They have no use as slimming pills, no use in psychiatry, and the dangers are so great. We think it's very important that the production of amphetamines should be stopped all over the world. Not only for our sake, because our amphetamine is imported on the black market from outside, but also for the other countries who will have this sooner or later.
Well, as far as Sweden is concerned, I am pessimistic. And I would be as pessimistic as far as England is concerned if you don't do anything to stop it before you've got it.
Mm-hmm. You think that once a country has it,
well, then you've got it for good.
Back in Britain, the question of control over amphetamines is still in the committee stage. Last Thursday's ban applied only to Methedrin. That still leaves a lot of amphetamine in other forms. This BMA committee started discussing the problem 10 months ago, just one of many committees involved in making decisions. It's a complex problem. On the one hand, the doctors insist on their right to prescribe. On the other, the Ministry of Health favours voluntary agreements between doctors, manufacturers and the government. Meanwhile, the human reality is dealt with by these two doctors who treat confirmed addicts on the National Health.
I think all that one can do is to prescribe them some other stimulant in tablet form, which hasn't been banned, you know. But of course it isn't the same at all, because the actual injecting of the drug is so important that they tell you, in fact, that taking tablets is not the same at all, even though it's the same drug in a tablet form.
I think we will have to find some, I mean, there will be a demand anyway for some form of injection to give them.
So you would prescribe another form of injection that was still available on the market?
I think that would be the only alternative.
Is there another one that you know of that you were likely to use?
No, I don't, and I've just heard about this banning of the Methedrin. I'll have to do some research into it quickly.
Some politicians are concerned about the gap between events and action. Mr. William Deeds is an MP and a member of the Government Advisory Committee on Drug Dependence. We asked him whether it was possible to speed up official response in future.
I think the necessity for something more comprehensive and flexible by way of legislation is absolutely essential. And having got this temporary measure to deal with the emergency, what we must now consider is what can we do to keep ourselves ahead of, rather than always just behind, the prevailing epidemic.
Do you think that when private doctors can no longer prescribe Methedrin in ampoule form, they will prescribe vast amounts of pills?
Well, pills won't be much use to those who want to inject methamphetamine in the way they have been doing, unless they treat the pills in a certain way, and I think this is a lot of trouble. And one hopes that this will not arise, but one can't be sure about these things.
If another drug suddenly began to be prescribed by private doctors in vast amounts, how long would it be before any action could be taken?
Well, on past experience, it took us nearly 3 years to catch up on heroin. It's taken us nearly 6 months to catch up on Methedrin. By the time the advisory committees and others have considered the problem, doctors have been consulted and so on and so forth, I'm afraid it's months rather than weeks. That's why I say that unless we can anticipate with a more flexible instrument, then of course we're always going to have this time lag between the outbreak of an epidemic and effective action.
Piccadilly, midnight, Saturday. Precisely 2 days after Methedrin was banned, we went there to get the addicts' reaction.
As soon as that happened, people who had got meth, you know, they know that they can charge any price they want to now. There's not been much about at all since Thursday, you know. You know, there's sort of a vacuum somewhere that, you know, it's being filled by people doing all kinds of shady tricks, you know, selling amps of sterile water, which costs 6pence in the chemist for 30 shillings.
One final point. On Saturday night, a London drug doctor went to a chemist shop off Piccadilly and told the chemist to start stocking up on 2 new amphetamines. Today we told this to the companies making the 2 drugs. One has already contacted the Ministry of Health. Perhaps this time it won't take 18 months to act.
So I'll just give it up. Well, try to give it up. Well, people have been taking anything they can get hold of.
I think a lot of people will be committing suicide in that year, you know. They can't get it, you know. The real junkies, you know.
That's when it's going to go up.
You just can't give it up like that, you know.
No one sort of knows what exactly is happening. I think most kids are really a little bit frightened.
I think it's bloody diabolical, really, you know.
They don't really believe that it's really coming on.
I heard the clinics won't take them on. They'll have to walk the streets.